Hey guys, I'm here with Chris Caskie, who is the author of The War Against Goyim. So we're going to be talking about his book. Specifically, he seemed to come to know me through he wrote in his book about the Noahide laws. There's his book, and so he told me that he learned from me and stuff like that. So we're going to talk about that as well. He has more than talks about that. We're going to go over a general gist of what his book is about. Then he has a lot to say about Christianity and that kind of stuff. So why don't you start telling us about your book?
Sure. So the War Against Goyim is all about the absolutely amazing influence of Jews on the world over the past 2,000 years, which in my views has been an absolute disaster for non-Jews. And basically my contention is that a lot of historical events or periods or even what's happening in society today, it cannot be understood without understanding Jews, their interests and their motives. I think that's absolutely essential. Yeah. So I thought it would actually be helpful because this book is so broad. It's like a collection of essays. I don't know if you heard that. I started I chose 20 themes and wrote 20 essays. I'll read out the title. So, General Points About Jews, which is a short piece, like an introductory piece. The Supremacy and Evil of Judaism, which is all about Judaism. Anti-Semitism and Censorship. Media Dishonesty and Deception, where I apply concepts from media studies to Jewish hegemony in the media. Jewish control of media, which I basically document the control of media, news, film, social media, and so on. Jewish influence in politics, where I explain the history of politics and how democracy's been corrupted and the influence and overrepresentation and so on. Central banking and other Jewish financial frauds, that's important. Jewish control of what's called capitalism. So things like the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, just stats about Jewish wealth overrepresentation, so on. Jewish involvement in slavery and piracy in the Americas, so the slave trade of Africans and Amerindians in the Caribbean and in the Americas. Jewish drug pushing, so I look at the opium wars in China and other examples of Jewish control of drug monopolies OxyContin and MDMA. The Jewish genocide of Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks. So they were orchestrated by crypto Jews pretending to be Muslims. Very sad. So I document that. Jewish communism. So I look at formation of communism, the USSR, things like the Russian Civil War, the Holodomor, gulags, communism in Spain, places like Germany's Hungary, and so on. That's very long, that essay. Holocaust hoax, interesting. I think one of the biggest hoaxes in history, very interesting. The Jewish hoax of nuclear bombs in the mythical Cold War. There's a very strong possibility that nuclear bombs are actually a hoax because Japan during World War II was actually firebombed, not nuked, and all the there's no evidence, there's no evidence of radiation or blast damage, and the eyewitness accounts and photography and so on. That's interesting, and I think that was a Jewish thing. That's quite a new theory. And then the Cold War was a big psyop. Zionism and the crimes of Jews in Palestine. That's of course about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and that was probably initially where I woke up years ago, or my foray into this, learning about Jewish supremacy was probably that issue through my Palestinian friend, 2013. So about 10 years ago. So that's quite close to me, that issue, but it's I cover, like, the how Palestine's illegitimate and the history, and it's just, a lot of things. Jewish Zionist wars in the Middle East, it's another important issue recently, and that I think I did quite a good job of that. The neocons and those wars. 9/11, Jewish mass murder and fraud. It's got quite a short essay where the preponderance of the evidence is like indicates that it was like Jews, but that is interesting. The Jewish diamond industry and conflict diamonds. This is interesting. So there was series of really like violent wars in Africa in like mainly in the 80s and 90s, where these rebel movements were funded by conflict diamonds. They'd like mine for diamonds and sell them in exchange for weapons, and like all of these the diamond companies, the people buying the diamonds, were all run by Jews, like places like Belgium, Israel, New York, and supply the government supplying the weapons, like the USSR in America, is Jewish fingerprints are all over that, and that's really interesting case study, which is I haven't really seen anyone like address that, but that's really important. Jewish so-called feminism. So I think feminism was originally like an admirable movement with good intentions, but I think it was corrupted. A lot of people notice that, and it's about that movement and the Jewish contributions. Jewish control of race relations and immigration policies. So looking at like civil rights movement in America, immigration policies, how like the media divides like whites and blacks, and how Jews they pretend they like blame whites for white privilege, and they never discuss like Jewish privilege, and how they like shape the discourse to their favor, that kind of thing. Jewish evolution, by the way, like there's a lot of like subtitles in this, so every essay, it's kind of awkward with this green screen, but there's a lot of subtitles. So Jewish evolution, the cultural selection hypothesis. So that's a hypothesis about like how explaining Jewish behavior, that it's like was basically the religion is like very supremacist and fanatical, and like people who didn't like the religion left over time, so there was a selection process for certain personality types, and they inbred in accordance with that, and that shaped their psychology and in turn their like attitudes to Goyim. So that's interesting, speculative piece. And then conclusions. And this second edition, I'm going to cover the Judeo-Christian subjugation of Europe and the Inquisitions, the Jewish history of the Inquisitions, their motives and involvement in orchestrating that. So that was long.
Wow, no, that was good. That was good. But at least, like you said, you wanted to do a broad book on a broad topic, and you said like there are tons of books of the Jews and communism, and the Jews and the banks, and
exactly.
the Jews and the this and the slave trade, and but you're right, there's not a lot of kind of tell all, get the facts all in a line, put all the books into a summarized edition. So it sounds like that's what you did. So in what part did you talk about the Noahide laws?
All right, so that's in the section on politics. So let me just look it up right quick. So, I was talking about it in the context of how like US politicians genuflect to Judaism and Israel. So I list the Noahide laws. So This is from Chabad, and for people who are listening, it's probably like worth like listening to these. 1, do not profane God's oneness in any way. 2, do not curse your creator. 3, do not murder. 4, do not eat a limb of a living animal. 5, do not steal. 6, harness and channel the human libido. 7, establish courts of law and ensure justice in our world. There's a lot of like smoke and mirrors with those descriptions. They're not exactly explicitly saying what they are. I mean,
those are euphemized. Like the real,
exactly, yeah.
It's no avodah, so no foreign worship. When they say do not profane the oneness of God. Okay, the thing is that the Noahides are 6 negative prohibitions and a positive command. So no idolatry, no blasphemy, no sexual immorality, no murder, no theft, do not eat the flesh cut from a living animal. But the rabbis can euphemize it by implying the positives of that. So no idolatry, it's not true that you go this way, but in order to deceive you, they'll go in the other way and say, affirm God's existence. But actually, you really don't have to do that. They actually mean no idolatry. But like they use lots of euphemisms like that, but purposely, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like almost purposeful in the text. What Alan Cecil said something about it, that they, they use euphemisms all the time.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like Goyim is even an insult, synonymous with, it's means nations in Hebrew, but it's like has really negative connotations in their mythology. But Gentile, and so on, they use these euphemisms. But in their literature, they replaced like the word Goyim, like in modern translations, with like words like heathen or idolater or whatever, to try to cover their tracks. In a lot of newer translations, the idolatry thing is huge though. So like in Judaism, there's 613 commandments, and several of those, I think it's like 10 are like commandments to like kill idolaters, like the Amalekites, and I actually have them somewhere listed in my book, but just give me a moment. Here's some examples. Commandment 33, to burn a city that is turned to idol worship. 53, to destroy idols and their accessories. 56, not to make a covenant with idolaters. 57, not to show favor to them. 596, destroy the 7 Canaanite nations. 597, do not let any of them remain alive. 598, wipe out the descendants of Amalek. 603, not to offer peace to Ammon and Moab while besieging them. Do not murder is mitzvah number 482. It's like, should be in like the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
But that's inspired them historically in a lot of their nefarious endeavors, like the destruction of the classical world by the Christians. I mean, a lot of the early Christians were Jewish, and they were motivated by that. And like burning down libraries, destroying buildings, destroying statues. A lot of statues that were destroyed in the classical world, actually their noses or their ears are broken, and that's actually a specific commandment in the Talmud. Like it's a specific way of desecrating statues.
Mm-hmm.
That they that you find like ubiquitous when you look at these surviving statues from the classical period. But the Inquisitions were also motivated by this purging of heresy, idolatry thing as well. That was part of their persecution. And a particularly egregious example is the genocide of the Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks. So in the Ottoman Empire. So I did an interview with Christopher John Bjerknes. He wrote a book recently called The Forbidden History of the Armenian Holocaust. And he documents how these Jews and Freemasons basically they hijacked the Ottoman Empire, and they identified the Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks as like Amalekites. These like the arch enemies of Jews. And they that was part of their motivation for trying to exterminate them. And yeah, and then they were pretending to be Muslims. And to this day, like most people, even who know about that genocide, don't know about the perpetrators or the role that like Jewish religious extremism like played in that genocide. And it's kept secret. Yeah.
Well, you talked about Christian destruction of the European classical world. What do you think of Adam Green, where he brings up that Jewish myth that the Jews are basically behind Christianity and installed the first pope and all that other kind of stuff? What do you think of that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, I'm on board with that. Yeah, that's more or less my perspective too.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's interesting that myth exists in the first place, and even if they didn't do it, they want it to look like they did. So
yeah,
and they they do that a lot in there. So they say the destruction, the myth of Purim never really happened, that Purim genocide that happened in the book of Esther, where basically they murdered 75,000 innocent Persians who had done absolutely nothing. And they say it didn't happen, but they wanted people to think it happened. I mean, this is what they want to be identified with. And I mean, they're glorifying this. I mean, is this a way to say, like, well, basically, we talked about, we both read You Gentiles. And in You Gentiles, he said that Christianity is about forgiveness and Judaism is about revenge. And like, this is a story of revenge. And it, a fable could influence, basically, they're saying, like, if you're ever in the position of Esther and Mordecai, this is how you deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Purim, they celebrate, their mass murder, basically. Same with, I mean, like Passover, the plague against the Egyptians.
Yeah, the Egyptian children, child sacrifice.
Yeah. So actually, for people who haven't heard this, so the story of Passover is probably the most popular Jewish holiday. Like, the whole family gets together and they eat and so on. And so basically, the Jews were supposedly enslaved in Egypt, which most rabbinical like scholars and even like mainstream scholars and archaeologists and so on concur that Hebrews were never enslaved in Egypt the way the Bible describes. But anyhow, according to their like bullshit story, so they were being mistreated by the Egyptians, and then their god like inflicted a plague on all of the newborns in Egypt except for the Jews, and the Jews marked the front doors of their houses, so their houses were passed over by God's like magic or God's spell or whatever, so they weren't affected. And then they it was basically this massive infanticide, and they call that like
this is a lot of their holidays are about revenge, and so is Hanukkah. Hanukkah is
against the Maccabee Greeks.
Yeah, it's about revenge, like, and I wrote about that on my blog when I was still Hindu, and I'm like, all these Hindus are saying happy Hanukkah, and I said Hanukkah is about the Greeks came in and allowed freedom of worship, and the Jews were in there wanting freedom of worship, and Jews were going to the pagan temple. It had been turned into a pagan temple. the Jewish temple. And Hanukkah started. The Jews think they look good in this, where a Jew who had become a pagan is going up to the temple to sacrifice, and 3 or 4 Jewish zealots come out and murder him. So this starts like, a war, and the Jews win it. And like, this is supposed to, like, we're supposed to think this is like good. And when I still thought Hindus, I thought Hindus were idol worshippers, and that they would wake up to the Noahide laws and they were saying Happy Hanukkah. I'm like, this is about the triumph of Judaism over idolatry, and you're idolaters, and, freedom of religion and all this other kind of stuff. But we can talk, I've been talking a lot about the Hindus and their connections to the Noahide laws and how Zionist they are, and crazy. And I'll talk about that after you talk about Christianity. But I have been watching, I was watching today, things about Christian Zionism and John Hagee and all this kind of stuff. And the Christians are just gone, and so Hindus.
Yeah, I unfortunately feel the same way. Yeah, I mean, with all the information that's so easily accessible nowadays, where we can show for an absolute fact that Christianity is false, and yet they still like believe it. Like, it's because they want to believe and because they like it, and they're happy to fake it till they make it. It's basically what it comes down to.
Well, they also, well, let me tell you something. They're not going to let anyone break their faith except the Jews. Christians won't listen to anyone else but the Jews. They'll go listen to the Jews. And let me tell you, when the Jews tell them Christianity is not the way and the Noahide laws are the way, they'll listen. They'll listen to that, but they won't listen to anybody else. When it comes to anyone else, oh no, you can't tell them. They know everything. But I mean, did you hear what happened with Paula White? Did you know she announced that Christians should not convert Jews over in Israel, and that Jews are to rebuild the temple and remain Jews?
No, I didn't hear about this.
Yeah, and do you know that she's studying with Noahidist rabbis who are teaching her the Talmud and the Kabbalah and all this other kind of stuff. And she openly said that Christians should not try to convert Jews.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Is it like a missionary movement?
What?
Is it like a missionary type of thing? They're trying to like convert Jews over there.
There are, yeah, of course there are, but she's saying stop that, and I think, John Hagee says the same thing, and John Hagee went so far as to basically say Jesus was not the Messiah. There's lots of stuff going on in Christianity that is peripheral to all these Noahide laws. They're prepping the soil, they're prepping the soil with different kinds of doctrines and different kinds of ideas. And this idea of not converting the Jews, that there's you've heard of dual covenant theology?
No, to be honest.
Just that there's 2 covenants, that the Jews have their own thing going on and Christianity is just for the Gentiles. That, this dual covenant theology.
So I want to get back, you asked me about Noahide laws in my book. So so basically these have been endorsed by very powerful bodies, like the US government. So 1991, President George H.W. Bush signed Public Law 102-14. And then there was 103-14. And you want to repeal these laws. I mean, you have a partition, which I signed. I mean, I'm not American, but I signed it for what it's worth on change.org. I think you're almost up to like, it's like
I'm almost at 7,500. Almost.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hope that somebody sees it. Actually, so I might have to. I have to talk to a lawyer again. So I consulted a lawyer about getting these laws repealed, and this is what he said. What talks about the Noahide laws being the foundation of America is a whereas clause. And so it is not enacting the Noahide laws as laws in America. However, the whole bill, the whereas clause and the therefore clause, are all offensive and inaccurate and can be repealed for that reason. Now, I, on that petition, say these are not unconstitutional laws. I said they break the spirit of the Constitution, but they're not unconstitutional. But Elizabeth Glass, who's Jewish and who ran for New York Senate, made a video about Dr. Zelenko going Noahide, and she said, and it's true, she said that the therefore clause is very vague because it enacts Education and Sharing Day USA and says that the government should engage in appropriate ceremonies and activities. What is an activity? Beheading Gentiles is an activity.
So basically, like if you they want, like, if you violate any of the 7 laws, they want Gentiles to set up a court system where they decapitate each other as punishment for violating any of these 7 laws, or the 6 laws. The 7th one is the court's one, so it'd be the other 6.
No, they an outside Noahide nation, if their neighboring nation is not upholding the Noahide laws with the courts, you're supposed to invade them.
Right.
So you are punished for not upholding the 7th.
Okay.
Yeah, you are punished for not upholding. But
do you think this is like the because I think Catholicism nowadays is kind of a spent force, and that was straddled the world for so many centuries. Was involved in the colonialism of so many countries, and but now it's kind of fading away. Do you think, like, Islam's also growing, but do you think the Noahide laws are like the kind of they're going to try to impose those on a large scale and try to make that the new world religion?
Well, I think that I don't like that, a lot of Christians out there are kind of make it seem like the Noahide laws are going to be implemented tomorrow night. They have a much more slow and intellectual plan than like bringing in the army and enforcing these. This is more of like a slow intellectual takeover of society until you have enough people that like the Noahide laws, and then you can enforce them by government decree. That's going to take a little while. They're just testing. They've gotten in the upper echelons of the government, so they have that already. But now it's just to get the rank and file in order, and that's what they're doing now. Like that signal from the Lutheran Church sending out that test article to see if Christians and Lutherans would accept, the fusing of Christianity and Noahide. And I think that, yes, it is supposed to be the new world religion. And I think this is what they're working toward, or at least a lot of them. And the Vatican is definitely 100% involved in this. They've sent out their decrees. You've seen that, right? You've seen their arrangement with the Noahide laws.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. I think that this is big stuff. I think that this is very meaningful movements.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to discuss Christianity?
Yes, just give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. Hello, anybody listening?
Yeah, so let's talk about Christianity. You said you wanted to talk a lot about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what I've been researching for the past few months. So I'll start more or less from the beginning of Christianity. So long story short, so the Roman Empire, they had colonized Judea, right, in the Levant, and Jews, they disliked their Roman rulers, and there was a series of like revolts and wars which illustrate this. And they also, Judah, they had this. If Judaism basically says that Jews have a special place in the world, and they should, they should subjugate other countries, which is so basically that was their motivation. Just let me look at some notes to jog my memory. So yeah, I read the book Jesus Hoax by David Scribner.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with his thesis that basically Jews, they invented the myth of Jesus and Christianity to undermine Roman rule. And basically, and I was also reading recently, there was this school in Alexandria where the New Testament was written. People like Philo, Judaeus, and Co. wrote the New Testament, and prior to that, they'd already invented other religions such as Hermeticism and Gnosticism. So Christianity was basically just another fake religion, and it was just another they'd already kind of perfected the craft of creating a religion. So yeah, it would.
Yeah, I don't agree with the opposite theory of that the Jews push and Claire Call pushes that the Romans manufactured it.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because it was, I mean, in practice, it was against Rome. I mean, a lot of Roman officials stated that it was like a power grab. You know, so yeah. So basically, like it developed as like an insurrectionist movement against Rome. Here's a quote. This is from Paul Johnson in his book, The History of Christianity. The monks were often formed or formed themselves into black-robed squads for the execution of the church's business. First to smash up pagan temples, later to rampage through the streets and basilicas in time of doctrinal controversy. Monasticism attracted misfits, bankrupts, criminals, fugitives, as well as the pious. It was also a career for raw peasant youths who could be drilled into well-disciplined monkish regiments to be deployed as an unscrupulous bishop might think fit. Yeah. There was this message of rebellion too in early Christianity, like that was alluded to the Roman Empire, which was taught.
Yeah, I mean it Yeah, it doesn't make sense because it destroyed Rome's culture. It got rid of everything that Rome stood for. It basically, it just makes no sense that the Romans would manufacture this way. And it makes a lot more sense that, if it was manufactured rather than naturally evolved, it came from um the Jews.
Yeah, it was originally just another sect of Judaism, but they changed it. They changed the angle to include non-Jews because obviously Jews were outnumbered. So how are they going to fight back against Rome? So if they could get people, because Judaism doesn't proselytize, and I think part of that is because they want to keep their stuff secret, because it's like a lot of other people would find it repulsive and racist. So Christianity was the solution, and I think that's how it developed. Yeah, I mean, they destroyed the classical world. Like 90% of Latin literature was destroyed. These estimates, and yeah,
That's horrible. I can't
so-called
believe that.
so-called this is what started the so-called Dark Ages. So the good book, The Darkening Age by Catherine Nixie, which the Christian Destruction of the Classical World, which is one of the books I cite. Yeah.
Oh, this is your new book coming up.
This is a new essay in the second edition of my book. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So in order to enforce Christianity, they needed like structures. So I think there was a Christianity, like it took a long time to spread. I mean, like it took more than 1,000 years to actually fully for Europe to be Christianized. Last place was Lithuania in 1387. So it took a long time, and they made a lot of compromises, included pagan elements. And I think the main reason why it was successful was because of the money that was in it and the career it offered to people. And this was suggested to me by Ray West. I talked to him. There's a brilliant article on his website about this. So they installed these systems in Europe, like feudalism, for example, and they had they had to have these rigorous systems of persecuting heretics and stuff, and they had to have a lot of like forced conformity for it to actually work. Like it wasn't an organic thing where people happily went along with it. So another thing I look at is the following the takeover of the Roman Empire like declined, and then so they kind of receded as like a power block in Europe. So the Franks filled this power vacuum in Western Europe. And then this is when the Roman Empire became divided sort of into, well, roughly like, the Western and the Eastern. So the Franks were originally a Germanic tribe, but there's a lot of evidence that they were infiltrated by Jews along the, like you were discussing earlier, like the Book of Esther principle, intermarriage and so on. There's a lot of old documents that talk about how Jewish immigrants came from like Greece through Germany into southern France and infiltrated Franks. For example, there's evidence from surnames, and also the really interesting the legal code of the Franks, the Salic legal code, because they were called the Salian Franks. Well, this important, I think, the group who founded the civilization. Parts of that legal code are derived from the Talmud, and it's a very important like legal code in history. and it's interesting. And then you look at heraldry. You know, a lot of the symbolism of European royals and nobility is Jewish. You know, like the Lion of Judah, the fleurs de lis, the French, like the lily thing.
Mhm.
The castle is in like the Tower of Babel, and there's a lot of like, but and the yeah, the Franks felt like the Merovingian, like all these subsequent European, like the Merovingians were like the kind of the founders of well, all European royalty now, like, well, since they come from the Merovingians, since like I think the 700s or 800s. So, and they were like the Sorry, I'm just checking something.
Yeah, everyone talks about the Merovingians.
Yeah, they were the ruling family of the Salian Franks. Yeah,
And they're supposedly part Jewish.
yeah, yeah.
And they spawned all the royalty of Europe.
Yes. Since that point,
You mean they've intermarried with the rest of Europe?
yeah, yeah. Um,
Oh my god, it's horrible. It's like this such a tangled mess that
it is. It is. It's why I'm struggling to explain it, because it's such a fucking mess. And I'm trying to find this thing.
I mean, it's just that, you know, unfortunately, these people have caused nothing but problems, even when they weren't trying. You know what I mean? Even when they weren't trying, they still did. Just their very influence, even when they're just being benign, is problematic. Not to mention the thing that you said, that the religion acts as a filtration system where only the worst people with the worst qualities breed and stay in the community. So it's not good to mate with them because, you know, it enters this, you know, personality into Europeans that's not good.
So the Franks constituted 2% of the population of Europe, but they had like machinations in place to expand their power and enforce the hierarchy. So they were very brutal imposers of Christianity, and they helped Christianize Europe. You've probably heard of, like, you know, like maybe Charlemagne, and, like, you know, how he decapitated the Saxons. It's a famous example. This happened like regularly. So the Franks invented also feudalism, knighthood. Well, established feudalism, knighthood, and invented the castle. I'm just looking at.
Can I ask you a question? I wanted to know your idea on this kind of theory I have. A little bit more than a theory. I'm not the only one, you know, to have implied this. But the difference between Catholics and Protestants, first of all, in my opinion, I think you have to be a little bit more, if it's really your choice. And for Northern Europeans, it, you know, was their choice, and they more than that fought for it. I think Protestantism is more intellectual and evolved than Catholicism. And I'm not the only person to believe this. And I do think that not only does Protestantism evolve you more, more evolved people choose it. Now, I had read something that in areas where there were Catholics and Protestants, it tended to be the forest. They called them the forest races that adopted Protestantism, and that the Catholics would go in and basically obliterate all the forest races for, because these were the more likely to be the people to adopt Protestantism. And so I think that a certain mentality has been genocided out, maybe not fully. If Northern Europe remained Protestant and this didn't happen, maybe that area is a little bit better off, but maybe areas that are Catholic where, they basically got rid of their Protestants, there might be like, maybe they have a different quality to them because they kind of executed a certain degree of what I would consider their more evolved population.
It's an interesting observation. Yeah, I'd say that's like quite possibly true.
I mean, I wish Protestants were still like this, but when they came over to the States, they were so paranoid about Catholics coming here because they thought there was going to be a genocide and that the Pope was going to inquisition everyone. So, Protestants did live in fear of, being wiped out by the Vatican during, that period of time. So there was a degree of mass genocides, and I don't know if that accounts for any difference between Northern and Southern Europeans, but I don't
Yeah.
think it's random that Northern Europeans went Protestant and the Southern Europeans stayed Catholic. Um, I think the Northern Europeans were more attracted to something more intellectual and literal, and maybe not so ceremonial and shallow. What's his name? I follow Raymond Cattell and his philosophy of beyondism, but
Well,
he
if you look
just
at
he warned against the shallowness of Catholicism, and he said that his ideology would spread faster amongst Protestants than amongst Catholics. Mm-hmm.
if you look at the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, is like I mean, like between Catholics and Protestants in the middle of Europe, like it was like so much violence. I mean, like I think 8 million dead is a commonly quoted statistic, and it's like that no matter whether it didn't matter whether the soldiers were Catholic or Protestant, they were violent either way. Um, I think it may have just been like a divide and rule type of scheme. Um, so
I
they
think the Protestants were
they
more. I,
propagandize different regions with
I think the Protestants were more genuine in that they were truly questioning ideologies and truly questioning reading the Bible, and not just listening, to a sermon and being forbidden to read the Bible. And, Catholic means universal. So that means everyone's believing the same thing. And the Vatican says what you believe and you believe it. And, you know, with the Reformation, the idea was, okay, you read the Bible for yourself and you come to your own conclusion. And I think that, I think that was, it's more intellectual. It's, it's what it, yeah, I've said it 100 times. It's more intellectual. Can you give me 1 second?
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so that's my theory. I don't like any Christianity, but I dislike Catholicism more than Protestantism. And I even saw it in my
Yeah.
own upbringing, in that I was raised Jehovah's Witness, but my father's family were all Catholic. And when it came to theology and everything, they were very shallow. And Jehovah's Witness, which is Protestantism, was a lot more intellectual and actually reading the Bible and cross-examining and that kind of stuff. And my Catholic family were just like, you go to mass once a year and celebrate Christmas and you're a good Catholic, and that's about it.
Yeah.
That's about it. And so
yeah.
What were you raised?
Secular.
Oh, just no religion?
No religion at all.
So they just taught you like good values, like be nice to people, don't steal.
I think that's a byproduct of natural selection. I think that's inherent in us. I think that throughout natural selection, people who were cruel or selfish were selected against. So it's just in our DNA, basically.
Well, I think people that
take care of one another, but occasionally you get psychopaths or people who don't abide by that.
Well, I would say that there's lots of those people, and they're people that need to be told and like these things to be enforced, that actually these people are, these religious people that are so strict, it's because they need it. You know what I mean? Like they need that control. And if they don't have that control, they're going to act like barbarians. And so then it's bad for the rest of us that I can actually control ourselves, and we don't need such aggressive control from the top and every aspect of our life under control.
You also see that a lot of people who are raised very religiously, later in life, they have issues with like drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, vices, or because they were repressed as children and as adolescents. So we see that a lot. I see it in America, like with prison. Like people go to prison.
No, it's very common amongst ex-Jehovah's Witnesses to be really into drugs, sex, alcohol. It's a big theme. It's a big
theme.
That's
actually, like, if you try to impose restrictions on someone, like it's too much. It's just bad. But yeah, there should be like guidelines. But I think a lot of it's just intuitive. Like it's in our DNA,
I mean, it would be better to just be able to live like that. I mean, I'm very unhappy that I was raised Jehovah's Witness, because it's given me a lot of problems in that it teaches you so much about what's wrong with the world that even when you leave, like, the outside world doesn't make you happy, because they went through everything and this is what's wrong with the world and we're the only ones that have it good, and look what they do wrong and look what's bad about them. And a lot of it's true. Like, people go to Jehovah's Witnesses because a lot of the stuff they say is true. And a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of problems when they leave, because just integrating into, no, we weren't taught to have pride in our nation or to be involved in our culture or anything like that. And it seems when you weren't raised in these things as a child and you were excluded from them, or you excluded yourself from them, you don't have that good feeling about them. I don't have a good feeling about Christmas. You know, I have a bad feeling about Christmas. Like I was told it was something bad. And, you know, like you're told everything that's not Jehovah's Witness is bad. And, you know, everything has bad things about it. And, you know, people like from the outside, you can point to Jehovah's Witnesses and be like, oh, this is all the bad stuff they have. And it's true. But from the inside, you can also point out and say, look at all the bad stuff they have. And it's true. You know, like one of the things, and it's totally true, is that, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses are a lot less materialistic. And, you know, they would always say, and it's true, like Americans are totally distracted by materialism. You know, they're distracted to the point that they can't even rescue themselves from like the invade. You know, I was at dinner at my father's house, and his girlfriend's daughter was there, and I was talking about Islam and it's taking over the world. And at this point, I was really exasperated, and I'm like trying, you know, to tell her, like, you know, I'm trying to say that this is really important. We need to do something, or we're going to be taken over. This is years ago, you know. But she's like, well, she's like, I know what you're saying, but you know, I worry more about my cup of coffee in the morning, you know.
Did she
And
actually say that?
she did say that.
Yeah, that's fucking like frustrating.
Yeah, no, that's what she told me. And like, that's what, you know, happens. You're more obsessed with getting a new toaster or a new refrigerator or
I think a lot of people just find this stuff so confusing and complicated they don't even bother, and they're just scared of it, so they don't bother investigating or even attempting to. I don't know. Yeah, I hear frustration. Yeah, that's fucking annoying.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous, but yeah, I forget what we were talking about, but
So we could discuss the Inquisitions briefly. So this is
yeah.
going to mean you say the Jewish history of the Inquisitions. This is really interesting, like the behind the scenes Jewish intrigues with the Inquisition. So Inquisition's like a long term Catholic policy of liquidating heretics or Christians who were not Christian enough. So I concentrate on the Spanish Inquisition. So there was this thing with Judaizers, Jews who were suspected of converting back to Judaism after they converted to Christianity. So there was the Inquisition was in Spain was set up to police that nominally, but so basically there was a deal between like the how can I explain this? So these Jewish elites made a deal with the Spanish crown that if there was a new territory that was discovered in the New World that was colonized, they'd exempt that place from the Inquisition. So Christopher Columbus and his band of pirates who were Jewish, they discovered like they rediscovered Hispaniola and Jamaica and so on. So Jamaica, for example, was exempted from the Inquisition, and so were these other places that were discovered. Like, well, there was a place in Morocco, and basically, like they leveraged the Inquisition to, like the Jewish elites wanted to encourage an exodus of Jews from Spain, so they would get involved in economic ventures elsewhere, like in places that were exempt from the Inquisition, where that, so for example, like slavery or piracy in the Caribbean, or piracy in like Venice or Morocco or banking in Amsterdam. And that's what happened. And the Inquisition was Jews were orchestrated a lot of it, like at the height of the Inquisition, the reigning Pope Alexander VI was a Medici, and he was Jewish. The Grand Inquisitor Thomas de Torquemada was Jewish. The top advisor to the king, Louis de Sant'Angelo, who organized this deal with Columbus and with the New World and stuff. And a lot of the advisors to the royalty were Jewish. And yeah, that was the Jewish motive behind that. And the Jewish elites, they didn't care if some Jews were persecuted in the process. They were using them. So yeah, that explains. I mean, that's the expulsion from Spain wasn't really an expulsion. It was more of a exodus, it was orchestrated. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've heard that, Jews orchestrate exoduses of Jews for, political reasons. And I don't, that basically hurting them. But it's aggravating, but in the end, it's always the Gentiles' fault, because it's always the rulership that gets in bed with them and does their bidding. It's always the Gentile leadership that is the armed force, and that's exactly what's going to happen under the Noahide laws. The Jews aren't going to lift a finger. I mean, it's going to be the Gentiles that enforce it, but it's the Gentile leaders working with the Jews, and that's the way it always goes.
Yeah, they rely on that. I mean, without that, they've always relied on that. Yeah. It's sad because a lot of people are so venal, that they'll basically just sell out for money. The Inquisitions were also instituted in Mexico and Central and South America, when they were colonized. So I also explore that.
Yeah, no, there was Inquisition everywhere, and and there's there were Jews in the New World. There were, anywhere that Europe went, the Jews got involved just on the same level and were influencing things. And this idea that Jews don't have influence. Yeah, well, they obviously do have influence, and it's hard to deny that, to say, oh, they have no influence. They're obviously everywhere and have all these organizations and are involved in the government and everything like that. But it's just everything has Jewish influence, everything, because Jews are in everything. And there's a certain Jewish influence goes in a certain direction. It pulls the society in a certain direction that's not good for us, and it's good for the Jews, but it's not good for us.
Well, may not be good for them in the long term either.
No, it's not good for anyone. It's a really big problem.
Yeah,
it's a really big problem.
But yeah, as I was saying, a lot of the leaders of the conquistadors, people like Hernan Cortes, were Jewish. And they imposed Christianity really brutally on Central and South America. And there's a good quote I want to read. Where is it? So this eyewitness is talking about the initial phase of Christianization of Peru from 1540 to 1567. The first method of Christianizing indigenous people was by force and with violence, with no prior catechization or teaching, as was done in Puna, Tumbes, Casamarca, Pachacama, Lima, and other places, when the preachers were soldiers and the baptizers were laymen, and the people were brought for baptism in collars and chains, or bound together in a line or herd, realizing that if they didn't hold up their heads, they would learn the taste of a sword or musket. So their plan was to initially impose violence and then later bring in the missionaries and the propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe I'm so tired of hearing about Hitler when the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews have done so much worse and like for so much longer and killed so many more people and were so much more brutal and did so much more slavery and were so much more racist. And it's just it can't be discussed enough, and it can't be, I don't know why people aren't outraged. I'm outraged, but other people just aren't outraged on the level that I am. And so it's hard to start like any kind of mass movement to basically change society's opinions about Christianity, to just sit there and be like, oh, it's okay. There's a Christian cross in public and nobody cares. Like even pagans don't care. Like you should care a whole lot, and you should, if there was a swastika out in public, people would be screaming. So why is it okay for a cross to be out?
Well, that's exactly the proof that Christianity is bad. Is the bloody historical record it has.
Yeah, that's the worst in
And
history.
people are so ignorant of it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know where all the militants are, but they obviously weeded them out and killed them all. And yeah, I mean, the people with the most pagan spirit were all murdered, right? I mean, the people who would object to Christianity the most and become heretics or, pagan fighters against it would be slaughtered. So it was just basically, the people that acquiesced to it who were left. It's just like
Yeah.
so culture really influences your gene pool.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be the case. Yeah. Fuck, depressing. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't really have any solutions.
No, well, I don't think there is a solution right now except for it to get really bad and then everyone revolts. But I mean, until then, no, the Goyim are not going to revolt. It has to get like there. I mean, we have to go through horror in order for anything to happen. These people are not going to wake up. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to move. And you said to me, and I agree, even way more than you do, that the right wing, the white right wing, is just totally fucked up and has no chance in hell of accomplishing a goddamn thing. And the Christians are not going to accomplish anything, and the Muslims are not going to accomplish anything, and nobody's going to accomplish.
All controlled. All they just don't have the
No, nobody's going to do anything, and nobody can do anything. And look, if I were to say the people who have it together the most and are the biggest threat to the Jews, I would say at this point it goes Islam, Christianity, and then the white right, because Islam takes itself more seriously and is more serious.
I fucking hate Islam, to be honest.
I hate Islam too, but at least it's a little bit more structured than Christianity, and so it
horrible. So there's also, I mean, I would wager that Islam was also a Jewish invention.
Yeah, it's to know it dies. Yeah.
definitely from like a theological perspective, but even in practice, there was hardly any written Arabic before the Quran. Quran's written in classical Arabic, this fancy type of Arabic, and it's perfectly possible that the authors of it, they obviously were conversant with Jewish texts, and Arabic, it's written right to left like Hebrew, and it's probably like Jews wrote the Quran, like probably. And then you have the hadiths, which kind of complement the Quran, kind of like how the Talmud complements the Torah. And then there's all these similarities too, like they both do circumcision. There's the jizya tax thing that the Muslims do, which is kind of a parasitic control thing, like what Jews do with the central bank. There's taqiyya, which is like kol nidre in Judaism. They both have taboos against like art, like you can't do like draw Muhammad and stuff like that. Similar diet taboos, similar clothing a little bit, a lot of similarities, and yeah. I wanted to ask you too. What do you know about the Islamic genocide of Hindus?
I'll talk about that in 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
We're talking about Islam. I was going to ask you about what you know about the Islamic genocide of Hindus. I mean, I've
Yeah,
seen people claim that that's like the largest genocide in
it
history.
was the largest genocide in history. Like 80 million Hindus were murdered. Yeah, and this was over a period of time, and it was really, really bad. And yeah, for a long time, my heart really went out to them. And I kind of saw them, I viewed them as like, Indo-European, the cousins of the classical world, and I basically like felt very deeply for them, and they're still going through genocide in Pakistan and Bangladesh now. But don't feel bad for them. Don't, because they're not going to help you. They're on the wrong side of history. They're on the wrong side of this battle. I mean, they're totally subverted by Jews. Totally. They are going to Israel begging to be called Noahides. Begging. It's horrible. And the way I was treated when I turned against the Jews was horrible. They're just they all abandoned me, and then they started attacking me and slandering me and lying about me, and I just got fed up with them, and I totally left. And it wasn't just that they treated me wrong, it was just the insistence. They went to Israel and insisted that Hinduism is not polytheism, and they just insisted this over and over and over, that Hinduism is not polytheism, especially not hard polytheism, which I was a hard polytheist at the time. And so I eventually said, fine, you're not. Yeah, it's not allowed in the religion. You're right. It has nothing to do with that. Goodbye. You know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Are you running out of topics?
No, I have some more notes here. Okay. Okay. So I compiled a series of headings with some notes, and this will help you help people understand what I'm getting at when I'm saying a lot of events and a lot of things in society can't be understood without understanding Jews. So economics and trade. So this usury scheme. So under Christendom in the Middle Ages, basically the Catholic policy was that charging interest on money is a sin, and they called it usury because it's not charitable or whatever. However, they conceded that it made sense, it was necessary, so they preserved the monopoly on money lending to Jews. So any type of large scale money lending needed interest. So if you wanted to borrow money to buy a house or a farm or a ship or start a business, the Catholics forced the Goyim to borrow from Jews. It's really fucking unfair. That meant that they Catholics should have just lent the money themselves. And that allowed Jews to control economics on a really large scale. So any type of lending for when they wanted to build a cathedral and they wanted to borrow money. By the way, Jewish banks and where they lent money were, if you look at maps, were located near cathedrals and churches. If they were, and to finance wars, rulers had to borrow from Jews, and that's how a lot of these merchants got really wealthy. I mean, they got the wealthiest people in society became merchants as the money economy developed. As money became more vogue. Moreover, if you defaulted from a loan under this doctrine of usury, you lost all of your assets. The Jews or the Catholics will claim all of your assets. It's in the play The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare, or some people think Shakespeare wasn't Shakespeare, but Shylock takes all of his assets, and that was the norm. Actually, that was so unfair. So the whole usury policy was designed to privilege Jews and to ruin people financially. And when Catholics talk about, even nowadays, these anachronistic Catholics or even just Christians will talk about how charging interest is a sin, you shouldn't do it, and it's complete bullshit. It makes sense to charge interest, but fuck, and then they'll say, usury is like a weapon of the Jews, and it's yeah, but that's because Catholics made it a weapon, and it wasn't that they didn't actually outlaw usury; they only outlawed it for Goyim, but allowed it for Jews. So the opposition to it was really illusory.
Yeah, I mean, look, Europeans made the wrong decisions over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Every time, every turn, every time that they had the decision to make, they made the wrong decision. And you know, it gets exhausting. I don't know what's wrong with them. I don't know. And, you know, maybe they'll never wake up. Maybe we're destined to be fucked up. I don't know. But
Don't know.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, with these people, you don't know because they've messed up. They're such fuck ups.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Now, central banking has been a disaster. This is basically the monetary system that countries use, or central banking or fractional reserve banking. Quite a confusing concept, but basically this has been a disaster, and this has been leveraged by Jews. So you had like the in 1913 the Federal Reserve in America, which was unconstitutional, and entrusted the control of the money supply to private Jewish bankers, who had their own interests, which were very averse to the public. And for example, it allowed so much money to be available for World War One, because they'd just create money out of thin air whenever they'd basically, the system's like, so say if you want to borrow money from a commercial bank, they'll check your records to see if you're eligible, and then they'll basically just credit your account with money that they create out of nothing, and then like, where does the money come from?
Well, yeah, and then we have to pay it back.
They don't lend money from someone else's savings account that's in the commercial bank. They create it out of nothing, and just give it to you. Yeah. Yes, problem. So you're going to say something?
Well, I was just saying that, yeah, and then the way that they do it, for every dollar that they print, there's an interest attached to it. So there's never enough money in the world to pay off the interest, because there's always more debt than there is money to pay it. And so the only way to get more money to pay the growing
to make
debt,
more loans, which creates more money, which creates more debt.
Yeah.
Because but the more you loan money into existence, the more money is going to be in circulation, which is going to lead to inflation and stuff. So I mean, you look at the US dollar's lost more than 90% of its purchasing power since the Fed in 1913, and same with most. I mean, the central banking scheme is pretty much international, and if you look at the names of the people who are behind these banks, it's it's like Jewish. And lots of recessions and depressions. It's so that's another thing, economic thing. It's really confusing, the concept of central banking. I didn't explain it well. It's admittedly, I don't completely understand it myself. But if you consult my book, there's a description there where I try to carefully explain it accurately. So another point is like money making endeavors. So historically, like the slavery and piracy in the Caribbean and Americas were important. These were basically largely dominated by Jews, and we're about money, making money. Here's a couple of quotes. According to Jewish historian Mark Lee Raphael, in all the American colonies, whether French, Martinique, British, or Dutch, Jewish merchants frequently dominated. Daniel M. something estimated that the Jewish share in overall trade was disproportionately large. The Jews constituted about 65 to 75% of the total Portuguese mercantile community, while hardly totaling more than 10% of the population. Talking about early in the Caribbean, that early period of slavery when it was founded. Jewish Encyclopedia of 1906, the cotton plantations in many parts of the South were wholly in the hands of the Jews, and as a consequence, slavery found its advocates among them. Yeah, so this was a money making thing because the slaves weren't paid, and when they were paid peanuts, and that was about money. There's an interesting thing as well after the slavery was abolished, which took ages. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. The banks were compensated for their loss in so-called property, so taxpayers had to pay. I'm trying to find this thing. How much was it? British Slave Compensation Act of 1837. Following Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, slave owners represented by banks were guaranteed £20 million in compensation for their loss of so-called property. No compensation was paid to freed slaves at all. This compensation was equivalent to 16 billion pounds in 2020. Payments were equivalent to 40% of the national budget of Britain at the time. And those payments made by taxpayers lasted until 2015. So yeah. Other things, drugs, like the drugs are a money making thing. The opium wars in China were organized by the Jewish families, like the Sassoon, Hardoon, Kaduri, etc., Rothschilds, and basically they forced farmers to grow this opium, and Bengal in India and other places, and import it into China and encourage get people addicted to it, so that would create a demand for it, so that Britain would trade with China, yeah, they made fortunes from this, and it's estimated that in the late 1800s, there were 20 million opium addicts in China. It's horrible because it's a very addictive drug, has very harsh withdrawal symptoms. And yeah. So that's another money-making thing. I don't have figures on how much money they made. I don't think, but a lot. I mean, they're not going to tell you, I don't think. Just checking. Oh yeah, Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank Corporation, HSBC, made its early foundational wealth from the opium trade. Let's see. Some Jewish wealth stats. So in 2018, the Wall Street Journal reported that the total assets of all private households in the US hit $100 trillion for the first time ever. So there's an article, A Brief Look at Jewish Wealth by Thomas Dalton, which is good. And he explained how if the proportion of Jewish wealth control trickles down the wealth hierarchy, then you can assume that Jews in America presently control $50 trillion. And this inference is not a stretch, considering the top 20% of wealth holders also collectively own more than 90% of all household wealth. And the top 20% of wealth holders very Jewish. So, yeah, I mean, they have a lot of money. Yeah. That's a huge issue with a movement against Jews is lack of money, because like it or not, you kind of need it.
Yeah, and all the people who have money are, wrapped up. If you get into the upper echelons of society, the more you get wrapped up with Jews. I mean,
Yep,
you know,
exactly.
so, the more likely that people with money are going to be siding with the Jews, and the less likely that, I think that only look, anti-Semitism or at least the crass kind of anti-Semitism is more common amongst the lower classes anyway.
Yeah.
And the upper classes tend to be more philo-Semitic, if anything. And so even the people, so the good people, the good people who would be able to raise up from the, how am I trying to put this? What was I trying to say? The good people, even if they had the potential to rise up into the higher levels, don't have the personality type to really get there if they're anti-Jewish. You don't really. Well, if you're anti-Jewish, it's going to be harder for you to move up the scale than it is for someone who's philo-Semitic.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there's a total lack of money. They all lack money. But the thing with the right, I think a lot of the right is made up of, marginal young men, and they don't have lots of money, and they do have marginal jobs. Like a lot of them are not, okay, part of their thing, I guess part of their mystique or part of their community woe is that, no, they're not CEOs, they're not lawyers, they're not doctors, they're not these different kinds of things. They're, underemployed and don't like their jobs and don't make a lot of money. And, that's actually kind of like almost comes with the territory. It almost comes with the territory when you're talking to anti-Semites, because, yeah, they're marginal people. They're, society tells you you're not supposed to be like that. So the only people that are going to do it are going to be kind of antisocial people. And, those are not the types that are going to be making, lots of money or fitting into society very well. But I mean, I don't really have any sympathy for them because they're disgusting and useless and stupid. I mean, I just have no use for them. I mean, they are, they like to post about how useless they are. Like, this is like this, yeah, like, look how useless I am. Look how psychotic I am. Look how, dumb and this I am, on purpose doing it. And so, like, am I supposed to feel bad for you? Am I supposed to, like, I don't even care about them. I don't care about them at all.
Yeah.
It depresses you.
You talking about like lower class people, or
I'm
just like
talking about
people who
I'm
hate?
talking about all these right-wing white anti-Semites.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. Like the GDL, for example. Like they're like they perfectly encapsulate what you described.
Well, the GDL
They're
is
like,
at least organized into a degree in doing something and has a website. I mean, that the GDL is about the best you can get, though. I mean, it doesn't get much more put together than them. And, they're, if that's the cream of your crop, then you're in trouble.
yeah.
And the GDL is really the cream of the crop of young white right-wing anti-Semites. And what's his name? Nick Fuentes is insane. Nick
Yeah, I hate
Fuentes,
he's
first of all,
useless.
Nick Fuentes is a
Doesn't know anything.
homosexual. Let me tell you, Nick Fuentes is a homosexual. I can tell he's a homosexual. And I didn't know that this was the rumor about him either. It's the big rumor about him. And Nate, they say that everyone knew this, but I just came out and said it on the show. I was like, he seems so much like a homosexual that it's not even funny. And they said, well, everyone knows he's gay. But this whole incel culture and no women and we
Well, that's
hate
the thing.
women.
He's marketing himself as this like right wing, like I don't know if he said he's against homosexuals, but probably I don't know. I don't follow him, but yeah, certainly a lot of his followers are homophobes. So
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's just, but and his Catholic thing,
yeah.
God, just give it up. We don't, I'm almost glad to see. I'm almost glad to see these dumb white young guys like this clinging on to Christianity. First of all, it causes division in their community because a lot of them are pagans or atheists. And
Yeah.
so it causes division. Getting into this Christianity causes fights between them, the white right. It causes fights. But also, it's so disingenuous. It's so just like Christian because our ancestors were Christian because it's our culture to be Christian, not Christian because Christianity is a good idea, just Christianity because that's the way we've always been, and like that's
It's not the way. It's actually a relatively new religion, though. Pagan religions are much older.
it is relatively new. And the other thing is that its doctrine is not good. And I hate this stupid shit where they post these memes of like Jesus all muscular breaking the cross and men pumping iron with a cross around their neck and a Bible. Like, Jesus died on the fucking cross. You're supposed to like
He lost.
Yeah.
They worship a loser.
Yeah, they worship a loser and they believe in the end they're going to be losers until Christ comes and saves them. You know what I mean? They're going to be on the losing end of the war until Christ comes down when they're all being beheaded. It's a loser's religion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolute rubbish. It's just absolute rubbish. I fucking hate it.
Yeah, no, it just causes lots of problems. And it's like a Jewish psyop, just like Islam was like a Jewish psyop. It's just, you gotta let it go, cut it out. But these like trad Christian guys are so cringe. Like, just they're so, like, and they're not deep.
Yeah.
Okay, I never see them posting like scripture and theology. It's all just like Christ is king, memes of Jesus. Like, it's not like deep theological, intense stuff that they're promoting. It's images of Jesus. That's about as deep as it goes. And like, Jesus is Lord. Jesus is your king too. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
King of the Jews.
yeah, he's the king of the Jews, but like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Anyway, I'm gonna be eating soon. So, did you have anything left to say?
Not really. I mean, yeah. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no, and I encourage people to get your book, The War Against Goyim, and take a look at it. And your second edition is coming out.
Yeah. Soon.
When was it first published?
January 2022.
Okay.
It's only available. Unfortunately, Lulu deleted it. It's not. You can't get the physical copy anymore.
Why? It was because for copy for
Hate speech.
hate speech.
Yeah. But they didn't cite any specific examples.
So where can they get it now? Where can they get your book?
chriscaskie.podia.com, which is like a webs. You have to use PayPal to get it if you want to buy the. I'll post it for people in the chat.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. All right, let me go. Oh, you're posting it?
Yeah. Just give me a moment. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, posted it.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, let's definitely talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. All right. Bye.
Stay on for. I want to talk to you
Okay.
for a bit.